All right. Welcome, everybody, to the fourth session of Office Hours. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started as people filter in. And like I said in the chat here, if anybody wants to let me know where and which OS and hardware you're running ngrok on, I'd love to hear that because it's always great feedback for us to hear about how you're using ngrok. So for those of you who haven't been here before, haven't joined us, Office Hours is a monthly live stream where folks from ngrok, from our DevRel, from our product teams are here to answer your questions directly from live, and do demos and kind of help you use ngrok in ways that you hadn't thought were possible yet. And when you register for Office Hours, you have the chance to send us in a question, which gives us time to prepare answers to demos. So if you didn't do that for this one and you want to join us for another Office Hours session, I really encourage you to do that. We'll also take time throughout this session to answer any questions that folks want to drop in the chat here, and we'll do our best to answer those live. So yeah, I'm Joel, senior developer educator here at ngrok, and I'm joined by a couple of familiar faces and some new ones. So maybe we do a round of introductions. Niji, welcome. You just joined. Niji, you've been here before, but let everybody know who you are and what you do at ngrok.
Hi. Yeah, this time I have a camera. So nice to see everyone this time. But hi, I'm Niji. I'm product manager here at ngrok. I've been here about 2 years, and I come from various other API companies in the space. So it's a little bit about me. I'll pass it on to Justin.
Thanks, Needy. Hi, I'm Justin. I'm with the customer success team, customer engineer and support engineer, here to try to help any questions we've got there. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Justin. And Justin has joined us for Office Hours in the past, but was kind of in the background. So we appreciate Justin being here on camera, and we'll be in the chat if you've got any technical kind of oriented questions that the customer success team is really, really good at answering. And we've got a sort of special guest joining us today, and that is Jonathan Stacks. We internally call him just Stacks. Stacks, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Let us know what you do here at ngrok, and we'll just jump in to talking to you a little bit about, the Kubernetes operator, which is one of those things.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Stacks. I'm a staff engineer on our infrastructure team, currently working on our Kubernetes operator. Yeah, I'm excited to talk all things Kubernetes, services, ingress, gateway.
Perfect. Yeah. We decided that we would, there's been a lot of motion with the operator lately. There's a lot of new features, a lot of new releases that are very exciting and sort of enabling things in the next couple weeks or the next couple months that I think people will be really excited about. So just wanted to bring Stacks on board and give a bit of a 101 course on what the operator is and what it's capable of. So with that said, like, what is the operator and what situations would someone want to use that over, one of the other form factors of ngrok being the CLI agent or an SDK?
Yeah, the first one I would say is if you're running Kubernetes and you want ingress or load balancer services, and particularly if you're running behind a NAT and you only have outward network connectivity, it's really helpful there. But yeah, like while you can Dockerize the ngrok agent. In fact, we've done it, and we have an image out there for that. You'd still have to go configure every single one of these individually and handle restarting them. The ngrok operator, we saw kind of this use case. Well, hey, we could be an ingress provider, and then that kind of slowly expanded to load balancer services and also handling the gateway API. So if you're using Kubernetes and you want a Kubernetes native way of configuring ngrok, that's where I would suggest that the operator could be useful.
Yeah, perfect. it's like a great companion to the rest of the other form factors for this other deployment strategy, if you will, that we know a lot of folks are using. So we were talking just a few minutes before the start of this session, and you said that you might be able to show us a bit of your home lab setup. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I can share that.
You should be able to share your screen. If not, let me know. And yeah, we were like, let's see what what this thing looks like. Not just a quick little 2-minute demo, but an actual workflow. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, so this runs on just some cheap hardware in my basement. I've got Proxmox virtualizing multiple VMs for my Kubernetes cluster. And this is what I use to develop our operator. But I've actually am using, if I go look at my ngrok dashboard, I've got argo-cd.my custom domain. This is actually being created and managed by the operator. We can go take a look at that in Argo. So if I look at, the first thing I'll look at is the ingress. So this is just a standard Kubernetes ingress. I also have external DNS set up with my DNS provider. So argo-cd.johnstacksxyz will resolve to the load balancer ingress hostname once we provision that and update the status there on the ingress. So yeah, like this is running behind double NAT for my home lab. You'll see I also have a module. While we're moving away from our module system to traffic policy, this will still just give you a good idea of the capabilities. So yeah, so you can see I've got Argo CD John stacks XYZ, and this forwards to the Argo CD server. If I go look at my module set, you can see that I basically have it restricted to only my email address. So if anyone wants to go try and hit argo-cd.johnstacksxyz, you'll get a nice little Google OAuth prompt there that will kick you out. So let's see. Yeah, and then there's one thing, like I'm also using Argo CD to manage Argo CD. So on the service here, I do have to specify the backend protocols HTTPS, and also, let's see. Yeah, so.
Very cool. And Argo CD, I guess, is a not a requirement of using the operator. It's it's one of the ways I guess you would deploy the operator along with a bunch of the services that you want to run in your home lab. So why did you take that Argo CD approach, and what kind of benefits does that provide you, and what did you have to do anything much differently with the operator to get that integration, so to speak, working?
Yeah, there's tons of, you're right, Argo CD is not a requirement. I just like it because I like to use a GitOps style repo to manage my home lab and all the different test applications that I install while I'm developing. There's other ones, I think Flux CD is also a big player, like Octopus as well. So it'll work with all of those. I just use it for managing all my different manifests. So I can also like the UI, so I can see ownership references. I can see, traffic flows, that kind of thing. So like if I click on this right here, we can see that, we've got internet connectivity to the ngrok CNAME, which then forwards to my Argo ingress and then to the Argo CD server. So.
Very cool. And we actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we have a guide about using Argo CD with the operator that I will, as we're going through this, I'll dig it up and drop it into the chat if anybody wants to see, Stacks, you probably did a, different method and different strategies than what I did for the guide that I wrote, but at least there is a sort of end-to-end walkthrough of how you might want to put these things together. Another question that comes up a lot with the operator, with Kubernetes in general, is the ingress controller versus gateway API question that people are always like, which one of these do I use if they're new to Kubernetes and like haven't done this before, or I'm using the ingress controller. Should I migrate to the gateway API? Like, what are you running in your home lab, and like, how do you see that discussion?
Yes, so I got started with Kubernetes probably 7, 8 years ago, and there was really just ingress and services, particularly like load balancer services if you wanted to get external traffic. And the kind of segmentation on that is ingress was designed to get HTTP traffic into your cluster, and load balancer services are for L4, so just TCP connections. So that's kind of how it started. There was also some other, I'll say, limitations of ingress as far as supporting what happens if I've got services in separate namespaces. But ingress is definitely the simplest model to get started with. If you're not doing anything complex, it's also built in to Kubernetes, whereas the gateway API and spec is an extension point. So you have to go install their CRDs, and then you have to find, in both cases, you have to find either which ingress controller you want to run or which gateway controller you want to run. But I would say the ingress model is definitely much simpler if you're not doing anything complex. But if you have like an enterprise scenario where you've got a team who's actually managing your gateway, and then each team gets a path underneath your base domain, and they get to manage their own namespaces and the services in them, the gateway API starts to look a lot more attractive for the complexity that it adds.
Awesome. If anybody has questions about the operator or just in general, feel free to drop those in the chat. Mohammed, I see your raised hand. If you have a question, just feel free to drop it in the chat, and if it's operator related, we'll tackle it right now. If it's something more ngrok, the wider conversation, we'll definitely come back to it in a few minutes. You talked about sort of enterprise, bigger sort of deployments and situations. ngrok is a larger sort of deployment as well. And Niji, you might have something to say here as well about, like, how do we use the operator within ngrok to deploy and configure and maintain our own services?
Yeah, I can actually show that if you want. Let's do sharing. Yeah, so I'm gonna pull up my terminal here. If you actually, anyone can do this, if you go and you see what api.ngrok.com resolves to, it actually resolves to an ngrok CNAME, much like your site would if you're using ngrok. So we actually use ngrok to host our own API internally. So this means that when you talk to the ngrok API, no matter where you're coming from, you're coming into one of our closest points of presence and then forwarding that to our API. I can actually, this is our dev box here, I can actually get the ingress for our API, and you'll see it's very simple. It's just api.ngrok.com, and that forwards to our backend API service. So yeah, we use ngrok to build ngrok.
Awesome. And there's a lot of dog fooding that happens behind the scenes, and we're definitely in that process of, as you said before, like, we are migrating from modules to traffic policy, and like there's a lot of that stuff happening behind the scenes as well. So yeah, very exciting to see a little peek about how some of that works. Awesome. I think that's probably about it, operator focused for now. I've got a bunch of questions that I want to make sure that we get to from those who registered beforehand. So yeah, thanks so much, Stacks. If you want to hang out, feel free. If you want to drop off and go write some more YAML, you are also welcome to do that. I know there's probably plenty to do. And I think this person was in the chat but has since dropped out, but we had a question in the registration page from Armando, and it was asking about whether there is a method for storing the username and password when using basic authentication and having that username and password stored in a configuration file somewhere. And Niji, maybe you want to tackle that. I know you've been involved in the basic auth action, and as you do that, I can maybe pull up a demo to show some of those options as well.
Yeah. Sorry, my internet was cutting out. I missed part of that message. My bad.
You're good. The question was about the traffic policy, or sorry, it was about basic authentication and whether someone can store the username and password for basic authentication in a configuration file. And I know that we have a couple of different ways to do that. So maybe you want to cover one or two of those, and I can share my screen to show some of the rest of them.
Yep. So by default, the new traffic policies are a configuration file. So if you want to store them in a configuration way, like a GitOps way, you can definitely do that via the traffic policy. So you can store it in YAML or JSON. If you want to have like some form of like encrypted secrets to that, you can definitely template that in. It's just YAML or JSON. So you could choose your templater of choice and then pipe that into the YAML and then output that and then send that over to ngrok. So it's really kind of like a choose your own adventure with that one, but you definitely can. By default, they are stored in that YAML file.
Yeah, perfect. I'll share my screen here really quick and show off what this might look like depending on how you want to set things up. This is using the newest version of our configuration file, using like the newest version of the ngrok agent. And you kind of set up your endpoint based on what upstream service you want to point to, the URL, if you want to use a static URL that you want to point to. And you have the traffic policy, and you're just saying on every HTTP request, you want to run the basic authentication action, and you can store your credentials here. You can, add additional credentials here you'd like. And this is a nice way to kind of encapsulate everything into a single configuration file. I would run this, but like I'd have to put in my auth token and everything, and it's a little messy, but hopefully this is enough of like an example to get you going, and we can drop the doc to that in the chat as well. And I mean, I guess speaking of, I hadn't really thought it like we would talk about this, but Niji, you just pushed out a huge documentation change for traffic policy, going into just kind of like complete reorganization and everything. Do you want to talk for a few minutes about the motivations behind that, and maybe show off just for a few minutes what you actually did? Because I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people, traffic policy is still a kind of unknown, and this makes it so much more front and center.
Absolutely. That is literally the motivation that was behind it. We recognized that previously when you went to our docs, so I'm sharing our docs here currently, but you could go to like docs.ngrok.com, view our docs. This is all live. But previously, when you went to the docs and you wanted to see anything about the traffic policy, you would have to go to the endpoint section here in the left-hand sidebar here, and you would have to open one of these protocols. You'd have to open either HTTP, TLS, or TCP, and then you would be able to see traffic policy embedded inside of this section here. And for a lot of users, it was difficult to find. Over the course of numerous calls, we recognized that users just had trouble finding it. Even if there's a search up here, users would just kind of like scan the sidebar first and then try and figure out where it might be. So we've kind of taken it out of these protocol sections here, and we've promoted it to a top level section. It has its own dedicated section now called traffic policy. If you click on that, you'll go to the overview, and it'll give you like a brief introduction on it. If you want to quickly get something running, so this will get you started with the traffic policy. It'll like take you through creating your first traffic policy, which uses the custom response, applying it to your agent, and this will give you back a like hello world. So you don't need an upstream server to actually use the traffic policy in this way. This is like short circuiting that connection and returning something right back to the user. If you want to do upstream manipulations or upstream policy management, we have other actions that are available. So before, when you went to this page for actions on the traffic policy, you would see a list, and it was kind of hard to get through. It was kind of hard to like see exactly what phase those actions were available on. And now you can like easily filter and kind of like granularly look for like what you're looking for. So if you want to remove headers, for example, you can search and filter them down. Also, something that we did add is before, since they were all nested underneath each protocol here, we found it difficult to actually explain the traffic policy. We'd have to keep repeating it over and over, like each kind of different concept. So now we have a dedicated section called concepts, which will take you through all the various pieces, the components of traffic policy, and what each component does or is referring to. So like when I say a phase, for example, that's the point in which of the traffic's life cycle that the actions will get applied to. So like on TCP Connect, every single request gets a TCP Connect, and that's a phase, and you can apply actions to it. Same for like when the HTTP request actually is established, when the headers are read and the body is there, like we can actually run actions there. And same for the on HTTP response. So like when we get back a response from the upstream service, or an action, short circuits and has a response. So like those are the phases that you can attach things to, and like if you want to keep going, you can dig deeper yourself, but it'll take you through all the different components.
Amazing. Yeah, I dropped a link to that sort of overview doc that you're looking at right now in the chat. If you are using ngrok and you hear us talking, on sessions like this or in our blog posts, wherever you might see ngrok people talking, and you're like, what is traffic policy? It's a new way for a lot of people of configuring the way that they use ngrok, as opposed to, passing flags on the CLI, to enable basic auth and things like that. So if you're curious, take a look at this, give it a read through, and let us know in one way or another, like what areas you're still you're confused about or you're trying to piece together. And there's always room to improve these things and produce more content for you all that really helps you get jump started on this stuff. So perfect. Thanks for that, Niji. To put you on the spot there, always good. You're always good at that. Like just show something off really quick, especially when you put in some hard work on that. I know. So awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I've got Greg. I know I see you in the chat. I'm going to answer your question. Actually, wait, not Greg. Maybe I'm getting you confused with somebody else. I've got one more kind of demo that I want to do that goes a little deeper on a specific question that we got. But we have two things that were asked while kind of Niji, you're doing your demo of the docs, which was, can I join your team as a software developer? The answer is we have many open roles that we're looking for people always. I'll drop a link to our careers page where you can go and see, what is it like to work at ngrok? Who are we? What are we all about? And then you can go and see a bunch of the open roles that we have. Lots of software engineering jobs. And Niji, I think you're also looking for PMs as well, or that search is ongoing. So, you and Russ are doing a lot of stuff. So I know you need some additional support there. So if anybody's curious, you're using ngrok, you love it, put in an application. That's how a lot of people that work at ngrok found their way there. It was by using it at a job or in a home lab and said, I love this and want to get involved. We have another question about about these kind of like, it says, how can we do authentication checks using the .env file in the ngrok YAML file? And I think we might need a little bit more context because I don't think there's anything to do with the .env file with ngrok. but that would be kind of where you would store different environment variables for your upstream service. Niji, I don't know if you've ever encountered somebody using an end file with ngrok.
I can kind of infer a question, like I can take some, I can like formulate what the idea around this would be, which is like you have an env file, you have some variables in there that you want to use within the ngrok YAML configuration file. That's where I think this is like this question targets. I think for that you'd have to do some templating. Like I think you'd have to use like an external program or script, or I guess if you're using .env, maybe Python or Node.js or something, or TypeScript, you'd have to use like some management tool like Vite or Grunt, or some some templating, something that gives you templating support, so you could template out the .yaml file to pull in variables from like this .env file. That would be my naive approach there. I think that's the quickest and fastest way. We don't provide .env support inside of the YAML just yet. I've heard a few users ask for templating support, which we may add in the future, but it's not currently on the roadmap right now. Right now, users leverage templating engines to facilitate that.
Perfect. I knew you would have like a sense of what this person's trying to do, and hopefully that gets a little bit closer to what you're asking. If you are still a little confused, and you're not 100% sure how to implement something that Niji just talked about, the folks like Justin and other people in customer success would be a great resource. They're always available at support@ngrok.com. Send them an email, let them know what you're looking for, and if nothing else, we can do a +1, as you said, Niji, on like, this is a feature request people are interested in. And once we get enough of that data from our customers that they want something, that's when, Niji, you go and start writing product specs and getting the ball rolling on that. And I think there's actually a few things recently that like you just are going to start kicking off soon that were directly based on customer feedback, like in the community repo and things like that. So we're always keeping an ear to the ground on that stuff.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got about 10-15 minutes left. I want to wrap things up with a demo that is related to this really great question that we got from Nicholas. And I think, Greg, I've seen you in our chat before, which is why I thought maybe you were the one who had asked this, but this came from Nicholas, and it's that they're considering using ngrok as the interface to an API that runs on network appliances they deploy across hundreds of customers. And they want it so that the API service that they run on these appliances is accessible from a single app running in the cloud. And they want to know how to do that in a scalable and secure way. So I want to do a demo that kind of shows a proof of concept of how this might work. And hopefully that is enough to kind of get somebody started if they are also trying to do this. Of course, you can also get in touch with us, and we have solutions architects who would be very happy to, help you build this yourself. But if you want to self-serve your way through this, I'm going to try to walk through that process. We also have a guide for getting started with using ngrok as your API gateway. And I think if you want to self-serve and you want to just experiment, this is another great way to get that done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the terminal here and share my screen. I'm basically going to set up a combination of internal endpoints for those networked appliances and one cloud endpoint to sort of handle all traffic and route to them as in a way that makes sense and is scalable. So in this instance, each network appliance is running the ngrok agent and creates an agent endpoint, and then the cloud endpoint is then using traffic policy to forward the traffic to those. So I'm currently SSHing to a Raspberry Pi that's in my living room, and we're going to pretend that this is the remote networked device that this person wants to run in their customer network. And we'll just start a very simple node-based API service. And then, you could go ahead and I can type properly. You could go ahead and make this available through ngrok. You see that, you get this this URL. It's publicly available. You can query, you can curl it if you want. And it didn't copy it properly. Well, if anybody wants, here we go. You can curl it, you get a response back as expected, and that's cool, but it's not very secure. It's not very scalable because this URL will change every time you stop and restart the agent, and it's just, it's at a path that it's, you can't predict it. You don't really want to type this out. It's just not scalable. So instead, what you can do is create a internal endpoint for this. Yes, and we're just going to call this pi.internal. Start this up, and you can see here that we are now forwarding traffic from pi.internal to the API service. And if you try to come back here and curl pi.internal, and this terminal tab here is kind of masquerading as the cloud application that's sending these requests. You see that it doesn't work. .internal is not a real domain name, and there's no way for traffic to route into the appliance, based on just that. So now you want to create the cloud endpoint to kind of tie all of this together. And the way that you would do that, the way that works right now is using the API. And we will soon have a way to be able to do this in the dashboard as well. But this is the way if you want to get started on this today. You're basically creating an endpoint, you're specifying a URL, and you are passing a traffic policy file to that. I've already created this cloud endpoint just for the sake of the demo. So if you want to go to appliance.joelhans.xyz, you can feel free to do that, and you'll kind of see what I'm about to demo. But that traffic policy file that I had just mentioned takes one action. It's that on every HTTP request, we are forwarding using the forward internal action, and we're forwarding to pi.internal. So if we come back here once more, and we curl this cloud endpoint, we will see that we are getting a response. And if we go to our appliance, you can see that it just came in. And we are now routing from a cloud endpoint into an internal endpoint. And that's cool. It was, it's quite simple to set that up. That kind of adds an element of security in that you're not exposing the service directly to the public internet. You're only making it available to your cloud endpoint, but it doesn't really handle the scalability side of things. What happens if you want to add customer A, customer B, customer XYZ? You need a way to make that work in a way that you don't have to come back into this file and add additional forward internal rules for each one of those. So one way that you could do that, and I think this way is really cool. There's a couple different other options that you could try, but I think using headers is a great way to get this done, because you can instrument your cloud application to add different headers based on information that app would have, like a customer ID. You can then add the header to those outbound requests, and you can set up your cloud endpoint to sort of logically handle that and route traffic based on the value of those headers. So we took the original file, which is just this basic forward internal. We've now added a couple things to it. Notably, we're filtering, and we're saying we only really care about requests that have the X forward to header. And if they do, we're then once again using the forward internal action, and we are interpolating. That's the word we use, interpolation. Just like we are grabbing the value of that header and inserting it into this URL so that we can, scale this up to any number of customers and API, like network devices that you want to connect to. And it's just a really easy way to make that expandable in just a single line, and you don't have to, manually add a bunch of different ones. So what I will do is update the cloud endpoints using this new traffic policy file. Get a response back saying, great, it was updated. We now have this traffic policy running on the cloud endpoint. And if let's say I want to just try to curl it again, I don't get a response, which means that my request was denied because I didn't include the header that we are asking for here. And then I can also curl -h, and let's add this header. Let's use pi because that was the name of the internal endpoint that we used initially. And let's try this again. And you see the successful response, and you see that traffic was now being routed from the cloud endpoint based on the header into the internal endpoint. So yeah, like I said before, this is now scalable as much as you want. This could be hundreds of different customers and networked devices running the ngrok agents. So you've got that scalability aspect handled. And by rejecting requests that do not have your custom headers, you add a bit of security there. So I think that's really cool, and hopefully that helps somebody who's in a similar situation try to navigate these handshakes between cloud and internal endpoints. So I'll stop my screen there. If anybody has any questions about that, more than happy to answer. But Niji, maybe you want to talk for just a minute or two about some of the other security-related traffic policy actions that we have, and how someone, just kind of generally how they can layer those onto what they might have already done with that cloud endpoint. We got you on mute, Niji.
I'm muted. Happens every time. Absolutely. We can talk through some of the available, ways you can do security. Like I said, I'm going to show the docs again. It's such a great place for you to go and learn more about all these actions that I'm going to kind of go through, and you can follow along. So when you come here, there are a number of actions that target security specifically for your API, and in different ways. There is basic auth, which is like, basic authentication, but there's also like circuit breaker, which helps you from like a DDoS attack. You're getting a huge influx of traffic to your upstream service, and you just want to say, whoa, not right now. I want to cool things off a little bit. So that's basically how circuit breaker works for you. But then you can also just flat out deny traffic. So in conjunction with what we call expressions or conditions, you can conditionally deny traffic. There's not an example of it in here specifically, but you could have an expression above this that says, like, if the IP is this specific IP, or if you see like a header user agent, which says like it's a crawler or a bot, just deny the traffic. So it gives you that level of protection and security that way. There's also rate limit. So you can rate limit incoming traffic to your endpoint, similar to circuit breaker, but this is on like a per individual basis. This is like it's kind of similar to if you've ever used ChatGPT or anything. You have like a rate limit. You can only do like 10 requests per minute, or 60 requests per minute, stuff like that. You can also restrict the IPs. So we did talk about doing that earlier using expressions, but if you want to do it just on a list basis, or if you want to use a resource, so we have an IP policy resource, which allow you to set up allow and deny lists, you can do so. So here you can see, I've allowed a specific IP CIDR and I've denied a specific range. And if you try to contact this with either one of these, you'd be denied. You could optionally choose to enforce this rule or not. So you can say like, I have these two lists, but actually allow them through still. And that gives you the benefit. So each action, or generally each action, will inject variables into the traffic policy. So like once this action runs, it'll inject these values into the policy. And with that, you can then see what actually would have happened. So if you didn't enforce it, the traffic would still be allowed to flow through, but then you could log out like what the actual result of that was. Would it have been rejected? Why was it going to be rejected? Were there any errors that potentially occurred? So like each action will do this for you. So and we provide a action which allows you to monitor that. And like if you wanted to like use our event system and add additional metadata to that event that fired off, you can do that using this action. So those are some of the ways. We recently launched a verify webhook. So if you're doing any webhook based traffic, you can validate the incoming webhook signature for a various number of providers that we support out of the box. So yeah, if you're using webhooks, feel free to check this out. We'll verify that signature for you. And you can also additionally, just like the IP restrictions, you can enforce that or not. So if you wanted to verify it, but also still allow it through and log out whether it would have been denied or not for debugging purposes, you can do so. Yeah, those are some of the ways that you can leverage the traffic policy actions for security.
Perfect. Thanks, Niji. I think the IP restrictions would make a lot of sense for this use case of the cloud app and appliances that you could say, you only want to accept or you want to deny everything except for like the known IP of the cloud app. And I think that would be a great way. You don't want to deal with JOTs and like all these other things, like a great way to kind of kickstart that security. So yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
We are kind of rolling up on the end of our 45 minutes here. So I want to start us wrapping things up. And there's one last question that I think was a perfect way for us to wrap up this session and lead into our next session, which will be happening in mid-January. And that came from Alex. And that was, has ngrok's future features and roadmap been finalized? And I think if anybody is curious about, not only what did we ship in 2024? Like there was a lot of stuff. Traffic policy is just one of the many things that that happens in this year. And then it's also curious about what's coming in 2025. Join us in mid-January, where we will be with, I'll be sitting down with Alan Shreve, ngrok's founder and CEO. He's going to do live Q&A. He's going to demo a lot of the things that were developed and shipped in 2024. And he will kind of give a teaser of some of the things that he and the product folks like Niji are dreaming up right now and testing out and thinking, what else can we build based on customer feedback and the way that people want to use ngrok in production. So registration for that will open probably in the next hour or so. So, feel free to come back to the registration page that got you here and sign up for that one as well. I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope we get a lot of great questions from people and just a big audience there. And for everything else, there's a bunch of different ways to get in touch with us, to send us bug reports or feature requests. If you need technical support with your use of ngrok, like I said earlier, please contact our customer success team at support@ngrok.com. Justin and others are there, at all hours of the day, answering tickets, helping people out, trying to get them on the right track. And we're very grateful to all of them to support so many folks. If you just want to talk ngrok, you can feel free to email me, and happy to start up a conversation about, just something you're curious about or want to help, want a little bit of help building something. Happy to do that. We have our community repo, which is a great way to file bug reports or feature requests and, any questions you might be having. And then, as I said, there's that final link to the office hours registration landing page where you can register for our January session. And I think with that, we'll wrap things up. Jonathan, Niji, Justin, thank you all for being here, lending your expertise. And thanks for everybody who is joining us in the chat. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing all of you in January with Alan. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.